while Dan is presenting, and we are recording the session, but ask that you not additionally record because we control the distribution. And if you need any assistance or have a question, there is a chat. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little chat bubble you can click, and Martha's going to help me keep an eye on that. Oops. So our agenda tonight, just a quick bit about upcoming events. Wow, I can't talk today. Then Dan is our presentation, and then Q&A. Upcoming events in February, trivia. Oh my God, so exciting. And there'll be prizes. So we don't have the artwork yet, but save the date, Friday, February 26th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. Grab your favorite snacks and cocktails, just like if you were in the Carpenter's Hall for trivia night. It's gonna be a really good time. More to come on that soon. And if you don't know about our Slack channel, that's where it's at. I'm going to tell you about it after Dan's presentation. And so our presenter tonight is Dan Gioia, not of Gioia's Deli if you're from St. Louis, although he would probably claim them if you met them because the sandwiches are pretty rockin'. He's a service and interaction designer at Fjord. Did I say that right? I passed my Scandinavian test for the day. Okay. So he's a service and interaction designer at Fjord. And you can see a bit about him here. And Dan is really passionate about service design and going to talk to us about that tonight. And I'm guessing that his passion for attempting to answer seemingly unanswerable questions drives that interest in service design. Just a hunch. But I'll go ahead and pass it over to Dan. And I'm Holly Schroeder. I'm the co-president of STLX. My better half, Al Lopez, is unable to attend this evening, so she will be missed. And Martha, former president, is here to save the day if needed.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I need you guys to let me know. Oh, host has disabled participant screen sharing.
That's a lie. Hold on. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
So, and then, oh, okay. All right, try now.
There we go.
Okay, great. And then Dan, just, do you want this to be conversational, or would you prefer people to hold questions to the end?
I don't mind questions coming in, and I'll probably ask you guys some questions as well. So feel free to like ping thoughts or questions in the chat, or just come out and interrupt me. I'm cool like that. So feel free to interact how you want to interact. And can you guys see my screen?
Okay, why don't we let the questions kind of pile up in the chat, and then when it's a good place for you to pause, then hit me up and I'll read them off.
Cool, sounds good.
Okay.
Screen's good, you guys can see it?
Yes.
Good, okay, so welcome to What the Hell is Service Design? So service design is by nature somewhat cryptic and ambiguous. I think design in general kind of has this problem where we like to over brand things and over name things, which is why there's like 8 bajillion design disciplines that are all kind of similar in a way, but very nuanced in differences, but we'll get to that in a second. So here's kind of what I have laid out for today. I have Q&A at the end, but again, as we just said, feel free to jump in with questions or ping questions in the chat, whatever works for you. So we're going to start with what is service design, kind of an overview of that. We're going to learn a little bit about what a service designer does, what some of those activities are. We're going to see some examples from real life. So some case studies that I've done while working at Fjord and some stuff from before Fjord. We're going to talk about how to break into it, how to tell your mom you want to be a service designer, and then we'll have a more formal Q&A. Looks like we already have a question or a raised hand or something like that. Am I mistaken?
I think that might have been an oops.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Cool. So a little background on me. I used to have this mustache, but that's not why I'm showing you this slide. I have a very nonlinear background, and you'll find that a lot of service designers like myself have a lot of very nonlinear backgrounds. That's for a couple of reasons. One, people don't really know what service design is a lot of the time, and they're doing it and they don't realize they're doing it until someone's like, hey, you're doing service design, you should do it professionally, which is what happened to me. So I started as a fine artist. I was a jewelry designer. I was a sculptor for a while. I was a fine artist. I did the fine art thing for a while. It wasn't my favorite thing. I didn't really like the art aspect. I really liked how people were interacting with my art, but not necessarily the art world in general. It wasn't for me. So I did a little soiree with jewelry design. I designed some high-end jewelry, worked in Manhattan, building these like diamond mosaics that were super cool. And then I was like, I don't really care to be doing this. I'm not really a jewelry kind of person, but I kind of like this like design aspect of it. So I went to grad school. I went to RISD, or Rhode Island School of Design, up in Providence. And I studied industrial design there. And while I was doing industrial design, I found myself kind of going beyond the scope of physical products, and also kind of going beyond the scope of digital products, which is kind of how I made my entrance into service design. I was applying for jobs at all the companies. I was looking at industrial design and interaction design and UX design, because I was kind of hitting everything in a broad way, until Fjord was like, hey, wait a minute, you're kind of doing what we are doing, and we're into it. So again, I work at Fjord. So Fjord is a design agency that works for Accenture, which is a very, very large consultancy, like 500,000 people large. And they work for lots of big companies across every industry, who work for all the people. So why am I giving you this context? I have the perspective of a design consultant. So I'm not an in-house service designer. I am across every industry. So we're talking healthcare, we're talking retail, transportation, energy, utilities, insurance, the fun ones and the boring ones. So just keep that in mind as I go through this, that I am one perspective on service design, and someone who works in-house might have a different perspective. Their perspective is probably wrong, but that's fine. But anyhow, okay, moving on. Part one, what is service design? So this is that very difficult to answer question. So as with every difficult to answer question, I went to Google and looked it up on Wikipedia. I didn't really like Wikipedia's description, too confusing. I found some nice frameworks online, but this one was a little too self-centered. There's this one, which actually doesn't even have service design. You'll find that a lot. This one was kind of close. It was getting there. Service design does kind of like, fit over everything. Everything else is kind of slightly more specific. And there's this one, which also doesn't have service design. So I kind of realized that I kind of needed to start defining it for myself. Of course, there is better definitions out there and better frameworks and better images, but honestly, designers, and especially service designers, and consultants in particular, they love to over visualize or over framework things to the point where it's just like so confusing. There's arrows everywhere. Like, let's go back to this for a second. Look at this. How do you even like process this kind of thing? Like, where do you start? So we'll start from scratch. So we'll start with service, for example. So we know goods and we know services, right? So goods are products that you buy. Services are things you interact with. So services that come to mind that are really popular nowadays, we have like Netflix, Hulu, streaming services like that. We have ride shares, like Uber and Lyft, any music thing, Spotify, lots of fitness services. When you think of like, Strava, those are services as well. So, the thing with goods and services is they're actually not two separate or distinct things. The way to really look at it is it's kind of like there's kind of a relationship and a balance between these goods and services. So all these companies that are creating these like physical products typically have some sort of service attached to them. You know, if you think about like, I think a really good example is, you know, Apple, you know, like they have all these physical products, but they also sell lots of services. You know, and we think about all these other services that are actually like inherently linked to products. Every large company has some sort of service element attached to it, whether it's just even basic customer service. You know, industries that are very service heavy. I mean, look at travel. Travel is the entire experience of flight is like a service experience. So it's a little more like broad than, you know, what our narrow definition of service might be for like services that you interact with directly. Most companies kind of play in this in-between space between goods and services. This is kind of the sweet spot, and I stole or I modified this graphic from Nielsen. I thought it was really good. This is the only visualization that I think was really speaking to me. So, you know, that's why service design kind of exists, is because there is a need for this. And if you look on, you know, Indeed or LinkedIn or wherever you look for your jobs, you won't see as many service design jobs as you want in the US. And that's because there are other people doing service design here that don't really realize it. There are strategists that are kind of doing service design. There are UX designers that are kind of doing service design. You know, there are people with titles that don't even, you know, exist anywhere else that are doing service design. So you might want to, after this call, do some self-reflection and see if you or someone you know is doing service design and get them the help they need. So I said a lot about services in particular, but I do want to clarify that service design, in my opinion, is broader than services. Service design is more about experiences. I found this great quote online. Service design is not simply designing a service. Service design addresses how an organization gets something done. Think experience of the employee. Designing a service addresses the touch points that create a customer's journey. Think experience of the user. So service design is less about a specific service and more about looking at things with a very, very holistic lens. It is ultimately what one might call like what you think user experience design might be, which is just looking at the customer's entire experience, every interaction they have from a bird's eye view, and really seeing, you know, what that experience looks like, where there's opportunities, where there's challenges, pain points, etc. It's more than just services, it's everything. So you might be wondering, why aren't we calling this experience design then? Because if it's more than services, I don't know. Someday when I am president of service design, I will submit a formal change. So here is another better definition from somewhere else. Service design is the practice of creating useful, usable, desirable, efficient, and distinct experiences. They are developed through user-centered, collaborative, and iterative design process focused on the user's final experience, considering multiple touch points, tangible and intangible. So, are we still confused? Probably. I'm slightly confused. Looks like we have a question in here. So then would most enterprise UX fall under service design? I would say no. Well, it depends. So enterprise UX, from what I've seen, typically aligns more with the digital part of the organization, and it'll make mostly digital products. Service design works to kind of look at the experiences beyond digital, beyond physical, and processes as well, which I'll get into in just a moment. Journey mapping, we'll get into that as well. So here's a way to look at it that I found really helpful that I stole directly from a coworker. So design has a bajillion different dimensions to it, right? We see graphic design, it is traditionally two-dimensional. It is static. We see product design or industrial design. This is where you start to throw in some dimension. This is your 3D. You know, you add your Z-axis, your depth. You have your interaction design, or what people call UX design or UI design. These are all kind of similar, but slightly nuanced and differences. Don't let me oversimplify it, but I'm going to oversimplify it. You know, this is your axis of time. Then you have service design, which is the fifth dimension. So this is multiple locations. This is everywhere the customer is or user is at the same time. Lots of mapping you'll see in service design. Lots of mapping of experiences, interactions, things like that. So what are the components of service design? What are the things that we're really looking at from that bird's eye view that I mentioned before? We're looking at actors, and I'll get into what those are in a second. We're looking at processes, so how people go about doing things or how employees go about doing things. And then we have tools and technology. So what they basically use to get the job done or what is being used to help them get to where they need to go. So who are our actors? Employees, customers, obviously, or end users, or whatever you want to call them. There's so much debate about like what to call a customer, call them a consumer, person that uses your thing. I don't care. As long as you treat them with respect. And then we have the business. In this case, we're calling it great brand because that is brand agnostic. So one thing about service design that I want to call out is a lot of the time we will focus on not just like that customer end user. It'll be about the employee experience as well, because that also helps enable the customer experience. Or other parts of like larger business. Maybe it's getting a business to be less siloed. And to communicate better, especially with these large, gargantuan Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that we work with at Fjord and Accenture. A lot of the time we're doing service design to help people within the company help themselves. So let's talk about mapping some more. So how all these things fit together, the actors and the touch points and the tools and the employees. So say we have our customer over here, we'll call him Steve. We know he wants to do the thing with our product, right? And that's over there. So looking at that, we know that there's stuff that like has to happen that occurs that is more than just like getting his product. Say he's like buying an engagement ring. We know it's not, boom, he goes to the store, gets the engagement ring. There's touch points along the way. Touch points is a service designer's like favorite word, touch point. So that's every interaction a customer might have with the brand. This is part of mapping. This is part of journey mapping, part of blueprinting, words that I'll get into again in a moment. What we look at here is we look at how the customer is interacting at every one of these touch points. And we'll deep dive into what the goals are at each of these moments, what the pain points, what the challenges, what they're really looking for, what their needs are. And we'll really try to like explore in thorough detail what's happening at each of these moments. And then we look at those moments and those interactions, and we look at what's enabling those interactions. What's happening front stage, what employees are they interacting with front stage, and what employees are they interacting with backstage? And what tools, I guess they wouldn't really be interacting with backstage, but who are the employees interacting with, or what are the tools interacting with? What's happening that the customer's not seeing that's enabling their experience? So we get deeper and deeper with this mapping to really get a really like super deep view of everything at play here. Whether it's the tools that the employees are using when they serve the customers, or the employees that are enabling the tools that are enabling the employees that are enabling the customers to do the thing. You can get like infinitely deep, but my point is these moments are what service designers look at to improve things, whether it's operationally or customer experience wise. And one thing that I think is probably most important in looking at, the customer's journey or whatever experience we're talking about is to look at what's happening before and after the customer engages with the experience. Where's the customer coming from? Where are they going? That's where the holistic lens comes into play. You can call looking at everything the customer interacts with the brand holistic, but you're not really looking at the customer holistically unless you're looking at things that are really affecting the customer in and outside the brand. For example, if I'm talking about like a healthcare customer, for example, right, and their first experience with the brand or with the healthcare provider is in the ER, and they're having they're not having a good experience, and you can't figure out why. Maybe think about how the customer got to the hospital. Maybe they took an Uber and the Uber was not a good choice or something like that. I don't know, but there are things that influence a customer's experience that may not be directly in the brand's control, but affect the customer's experience that need to be addressed and considered. We also think about things that influence the customer's perception of things. So if I'm shopping with a brand, like, I'm shopping online with a retailer, I'm comparing that retailer to other retailers online, even if it's not a very similar experience. I'm kind of comparing everything I do to Amazon. When I buy something, I expect incredible customer service. I expect all these things. So these are kind of things you have to consider as you go through this, is what's affecting the customer that you can't really see. Of course, I do want to call out that a lot of the time we do want to keep the customer in the center here. As every design 101 will tell you, nothing is more important than your customer. Customer is the center of the world. Do everything the customer wants. So I'll call that out here.
Dan, before we get too much further, we have a couple questions in the chat. Is this an okay time?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so the first one's from Ying, and the question is, so then would most enterprise UX fall under service design?
Yeah, I would say that depends on the company you're working for. From what I've seen, every time I either read a job description or talk to someone else in the design world, they'll have vastly different titles doing the same thing, or the same title doing vastly different things. So UX is, I would say it's somewhat subjective. A lot of the time it falls under the umbrella of like a digital product. So, if you're looking at jobs and you want more of a service design oriented job, look at UX job descriptions, because sometimes it'll be very similar.
Okay, thank you.
What else we got in here?
I think that's it. Martha.
I think you've been capturing them in real time.
Okay.
Yeah, I just missed it. That was my error.
All good. I think I gave a better description the second time.
Facilitator error, but hey, we iterated and now we got better.
Look at that design process in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on to this really great quote. So, service design paints a clear, holistic picture of customers, employees, businesses, and the interplay between them. It maps experiences and defines North Stars and principles for companies to champion as they move to solve real customer needs. Service design has a bird's eye view with X-ray goggles, identifying patterns, cycles, moments that matter, and the anatomy of every experience. So again, I want to harp on some of these words. Holistic again, like we're looking at the big picture, but we're still zooming in really hard. When we say X-ray goggles, we mean we're looking past what we can actually see into what's supporting the experience behind the scenes. And then again, customer needs. Nothing is more important than actually solving real, genuine needs and not just creating things for the sake of creating things. You know who said this beautiful quote? It was me. Guys, it was me. Anyhow, moving on. So, who are service designers?
I wish you could hear us laughing. You're hitting all the jokes.
For what I was gonna say, we need like a laugh button.
No, it's okay. Don't give me the validation I'm looking for.
I was impressed, as were many other people in the chat.
Listen, it is a Thursday evening, and we're here to have a good time and learn. So, who are service designers and what do they do? So, the anatomy of a service designer. Let's get into it. Service designers are empathetic, first of all. We do a lot to understand our customers. We do a lot to, really connect with them. There's a lot of research that goes into this. A lot of understanding when it comes to customers, stakeholders as well that are involved in the project. We're passionate. It's hard to not be passionate, especially doing service design like today. A lot of the work we do, a lot of the work I do in particular, is on such a scale that like it has real implications and repercussions when it actually gets out into the real world. And it's hard to not be passionate about that. We're also curious. We are naturally the kind of people that are going to question things or, want to learn more about something or really want to understand a behavior or something like that, or why a customer or a person or an employee does a thing the way they do. In our craft, I would say we find the balance between balanced and specialized. Service designers, I think, by nature are somewhat generalists, because service designers often act as that connective tissue between other types of designers, other parts of the business. So not just knowing how to do someone else's job, but just knowing enough that you can actually help them do their job better, or like hand them off something that is like ready for them to run with. Specialized because I feel like everyone's got their own flavor, right? Like I personally love like experimental design research. I'm all about it. And I love like physical prototyping. It's my industrial design sculptor in me. Like I love doing that. So like that's my area that I run with. But that being said, like I kind of know how to do a little bit of everything, just enough to get in trouble, but not enough to actually do anything worth looking at. Never let me make any wireframes. We're also adaptable. There's a lot of curveballs in service design, and you can't always use the same tool twice. So service designers typically, need to modify things or adjust things. And you think like, you see one problem, you see them all. You do one healthcare client, you do them all. It's not necessarily true. And we're highly collaborative. Service designers thrive in communities of other designers. So that's a very important detail, and not just other designers, but anyone that has expertise in any way. Like I love working with people on the client side that like are like operations people. I remember I was working with a fast food client, and I was working with operations people, and they were just like so into like toasting buns instead of like frying buns because it was faster, and they were just so passionate about it. And they had insights in there that were just like locked away, and like collaborating with them was able to like draw those out and like pull all those ideas that they've been like sitting on for years. Anyway, and on the outside, we're empathetic again. I mentioned this before. We're not just empathetic for our customers, we're empathetic for our clients as well. We understand the people we're working with, the pressures they have, what's influencing their decisions. And ultimately, so we know that serving them will ultimately better serve the end customer, unless they suck, because sometimes they suck. We're bold as well. You kind of have to be bold, and you kind of have to fight for the customer sometimes. If you have a client that is very insistent on things and doesn't understand things, you have to find ways to communicate what you need to communicate to them to get them to create that better customer experience. And we're communicative. As I said before, we're the connective tissue between a lot of different parts of organizations, or between different designers and things like that. So being able to tell a good story and communicate well, that is part of being a service designer, and it's a skill that is learned. And I would say all of these skills and all of these attributes I'm describing are things that like anyone can grow. These are muscles that we all can grow. And we're all destined to be extinct because we're dinosaurs. Moving on, there are some specific roles and goals of a service designer.
I'm sorry, there's sort of a question. It's service design is greater than is greater than profit.
So obviously money makes the world go round. And ultimately, like we are often like, we have to operate in certain constraints. That being said, there are ways to navigate around those constraints to be able to deliver the value you need to deliver. Within Fjord, and a practice I have is to deliver +1s on every project. So there's the thing the client asks for, and there's the thing the client needs. And it's always important to do the thing the client asks for, but as designers are passionate people, you try to find a way to also give them what they need. So sometimes you don't get, that's not part of the scope of work or the contract that you signed, but something extra you add on to really help them get to the goal they need to get to. I don't know if that was an answer to the question. I don't really know if it was a question, but I did my best. So here are some roles and goals that a service designer might have. Some call these hats. I worked with a gentleman named Robert Bao, who is basically like the service design Mr. Miyagi. He is this like wonderful Swedish man. He used to work with me at Fjord. He has since moved on from Fjord, but he actually took what we have here and like ran with it and made it much better. But this is the old busted up version. Anyhow, so here are some of the roles that they have. The orchestrator. So this is the designer that will think holistically build relationships, map things out. You know, this is the one that kind of that takes that like step back and views things in that way. We have the explorer, which is all about you know, discovering new things, researching, finding new tools, creating new tools, developing new ideas, solving problems in that way. We have the translator. So this is where a lot of communication comes in. So this is connecting different parts of the organization together. They might change, they might tailor messages in a certain way or tell stories. You know, communication, again, is a huge part of service design, and honestly, any design at this point. Design is half communication. There's also the creator. So these are the ones that define experiences, they validate things, they build approaches, they look for how to solve the problem before we start solving the problem. You know, these are the ones that'll set up a project to be like, okay, this is the research we need to do. I'm gonna pause here for questions if you guys have any. So that was Robert Bow. I'll give you his last name. He's gonna kill me for
You could
saying
type that in, probably.
That's his last name.
There we go.
Oh wait, I think it's BAU actually. Yes. Thank you, Matt. Hello again, Matt. I know you read the portfolio review. Okay, cool. I'm going to. Oh God, you found his LinkedIn. Good grief. Okay, you guys are quick. Moving on. So here are some of the activities of a service designer. So design research. This is one of my personal favorites. This is all about like learning more about the customer, the problem, whatever it is. Again, this is more about empathy than science. You're trying to learn about customer behaviors, what they need. Typically, service designers they live in the qualitative. Not to say quantitative isn't present. Qualitative is typically the language we speak. Qualitative married with quantitative is like the best thing you can have. You're bulletproof. So if you work for a place that's got those two parts of the organization working really well together, you know, or two fields working well together, you've got some really bulletproof findings and insights. And again, typically this is about exploring over proving. Of course, there's types of design research that you want to validate your designs with, but especially with service design, we focus a lot on exploration. And there's a few different types down here. So we have generative, evaluative, and validation. Generative is you know, starting with nothing, just learning for the sake of learning, just exploring. Evaluative is gauging interest, and validation is gauging potential value, like to a business potentially. So we have a couple questions, and I'll see if I can get to these. How strong do you have to be with these service design hats? You don't have to have all these skills. Not everyone has to have every skill. Obviously, as you like grow in your service design career, you could probably bounce around these a little more. You know, when I first started at Fjord after grad school, I would say that I was definitely more of an orchestrator and more of an explorer, and I had like a little bit of skill in the translator area. I wouldn't call myself a creator quite yet. Since then, I think I've grown a lot of these skills. But you know, keep in mind, if you're trying to break into this, cut yourself some slack and just try to frame your portfolio in a way that looks like you know more than you do. Moving on. Oh, there's another question in here. Where is it typically housed? So design research and marketing research are different things, but I mean, you can learn a lot from, you know, what marketing is asking and exploring. Design research does its own research, in my opinion. So, insight and opportunity generation. So, coming out of design research, and you don't always have an opportunity to do your own research, especially if you're in an agency. Sometimes it's like, hey, here's stuff we learned, do stuff with this, or find new insights in the research we did, which is always fun. But I personally, you know, every designer loves to do their own research. That's not true. I love to do my own research because I feel like I can ask the right questions. So insights. A lot of people mistake insights for observations or observations for insights. And there's a big difference, is that insights are not, they're not obvious. They're interesting and relevant, I would say. Relevant is probably a better word, and they're actionable. So these are actually things that can be addressed with the tools or capabilities that a company might have or team of people might have. And insight is something that can really drive change. And opportunities are typically phrased in design or in service design as how might we statements. And these are meant to provoke thought. You could take these into a workshop and then like generate ideas based off of these. And there's like a sweet spot for that, which is like, you want your how might we statement to not be like, how do you make the customer click this button more? That's not a good how might we statement. But it's also not a good how might we statement. It's like, how do we get the customer to be happy? That's still too broad. There's a spot in between there where you kind of want to like address the problems or needs they have, and leave that question open for lots of interpretation or ideation against. Again, post-its are really big. We do that too. Moving on, there's concept generation. So concepts, we're kind of going in order here, right? So we're getting research, then we're getting opportunities and insights, and now we're into concept generation. So concepts, these need to be responding to real customer needs. And these are based off of our insights and opportunities. Concept generation, if you're in any design discipline, which I assume probably incorrectly, most of you on this call are, this should feel very similar, right? Like, you want to get a bunch of ideas out there. You want to bring some fresh minds into the room. You want to just like exhaust your ideas. No idea is bad until you go back through and you prioritize what good is. So this should feel familiar to everybody. On the right, we actually have a prototype, a cardboard prototype from a workshop of a drive-through that we made, which was really fun. From that same fast food restaurant I was talking about before. Service prototyping. So again, I mentioned this before, is one of my favorite things. This is when you make to learn, basically. Anyone that's Googled IDEO would probably know a lot about like make to learn, things like that. There's lots of reasons you might do a service prototype. You might literally want to testing whether or not the service works. And you don't actually have to have like the whole thing built out to do a service prototype, right? Like you want to focus, as with any type of design research, you want to focus on what you're trying to answer. So if I was trying to like understand whether or not, a self-driving capability would build confidence for a driver, I don't need to have the whole car potentially. All I really need to have is maybe the dashboard or something that simulates that experience enough to actually get the information that we need out of that. And then, as I probably been teasing a lot, we have journey mapping and blueprinting. So journey mapping is basically just laying out how the customer goes about doing something. This is where we'll lay out our needs, our goals. We'll lay out things that are impacting the customer experience in and out of it. We basically made a little journey map before. And deeper than that, deeper than a journey map is a blueprint. And a blueprint is where we really have all of our really exhaustive information. We have people, processes, technology, everything that enables a customer to do a thing. And you can have, especially for journey mapping, you can have a current state journey map and a future state journey map. A current state journey map might document, pain points, challenges, things like that. But a future state journey map might be aspirational. So there's a question about journey mapping doesn't come before prototyping. It really depends. I would say it usually probably does happen first, journey mapping. You don't always do a journey map, but if I were to craft a service design, everything in one package kind of project, there would be journey mapping that leads into service prototyping. I know I've fallen apart on my order of operations with telling you about these things. One thing I want to call out with journey mapping is, if you're ever doing this, I suspect we have some beginning early career designers on here or some students as well. You always want to consider your audience when you make a journey map and the purpose of making your journey map. I've been working with a lot of companies lately that want living blueprints, for example. They want something that they can take and edit as they make innovation or as they innovate. So while we traditionally might see blueprints or journeys as these beautiful designed objects, and actually making a lot of them in Excel and in Miro and Mural lately. So journey Journey maps can evolve. I mean, the customer experience can change. I mean, COVID upset the entire customer experience. So touch points changed for the customer, behaviors, needs, goals even changed. So journey maps can change. Workshops. This is what design agencies are all about: co-creation, co-making, collaborating, whatever you want to call it. So this is about getting people from all the actors we talked about before. You know, we talked about customers, we talked about employees, we talked about stakeholders, clients. Get them all in a room together. They all have insights on the experience that they might not even know they have. You get all these people together, you give them the insights, you get them to give you more, and you just pull out all those ideas, and you get everyone bought into what the next steps might be for a project. And these can be multi-day things too, right? Like you can have a small like mini workshop or a little co-making session that lasts like an hour or two, or you can have a huge multi-day thing. I've heard of workshops that are 3-4 days long, and I got to tell you, they are exhausting. Everyone's on their feet, blood's flowing, a whole forest worth of Post-its. Anyway, storytelling is super important as well. Service designers in particular, there's lots of different ways to tell a story, and there's lots of different audiences you might have. I have a challenge right now where I'm working on a journey that is for multiple audiences. This is a document that product teams need to take and run with. And this is also a document that senior leadership, the CEO and whatnot, and CIO or whatever, they also need to be able to digest it. So storytelling often has a lot of complexities and nuances to it. So you have to find the right tool, format, whatever it is to tell that right story. I was working on a project about the future of travel right when COVID first started. And I was building this deck, and before it was finished, people kept taking this deck and running to clients with it. And we were realizing that the story was falling apart. Every time someone took it, it just lost a little bit more of the story. So we actually wound up creating a video to make that really really package up that story so you couldn't fuck it up, basically. So think about that when it comes to storytelling. Is you want to be able to build a story that fits the audience, and if need be, kind of foolproof. And tell stories in tons of different ways, whatever you're comfortable with. If you can't make a video, that's fine. If you can't illustrate, that's fine. There's tons of ways to tell a story. You can even use words in a way that feels more poetic, or give certain things more punch, without it being like an essay. So there's lots of places you can go with this. And then of course there's a lot more. There's a lot of other tools and things you can do that don't necessarily fit into traditional service design deliverables or activities. This is something I did in grad school. I was teaching a class at RISD that was called Materializing Social Media. And what it was basically was trying to map out digital experiences in a physical space. It was all about recontextualizing and trying to learn how are we actually navigating these spaces, and how does that really affect how does that really affect us? And what can we learn from recontextualizing Instagram? So one of my students basically, or a few of my students basically made this tunnel that had to become Instagram. This is 4 years ago now, so Instagram's changed a little bit. But it was really interesting to see how people mapped out Instagram versus Snapchat versus Tinder versus Facebook, and all the ways these people interacted in these spaces were drastically different. So it was super interesting. And here's one last fun example. There's a designer I used to work with. His name was Dan Kim. He was much better than I was, and he was really good at storytelling in really fun and engaging ways. Obviously, I lean on humor, but he found other ways to do it. So this was an energy utility that we were working with, and we were trying to express to them the difficulties of paying one's bill when you're in an arrearage, when you can't afford your bill. And how difficult it is to start managing your bills, because it's honestly like a wildfire. You're trying to put out one fire, then another fire starts because you're paying attention elsewhere. And the way we did that, the way we told the story is we had a game called Balance Bean. So we gave the table a bunch of beans and, you know, a certain amount of beans, and they each had these cards, and they had to basically negotiate, like, you know, on each turn that they had, you know, who got the beans and who didn't. And then at the end of the game, we basically tallied up, like, you know, how often did people mess up, or like how many things did like wound up like in arrearage of beans. And the client was like, wow, it was like really hard to balance all that. It was super stressful. And it was like a really good way to like immerse the client in our situation and in their customer situation. So super cool. And then I'll get to one last slide, and then we'll talk about some of these questions that we have. So service designers, best friends. I'll tell you why we're best friends. Program managers. So these are people that, you know, oftentimes will, you know, keep things on track, stop us from like drifting off of scope, because designers, especially service designers, often don't have the shackles of reality to hold us back. You know, we'll think of concepts that are so wild, like, oh, what if, you know, instead of cars, we had people carrying us everywhere. I don't know. That's a bad example, but you know, program managers keep us on track. Business designers also tell us what is financially feasible. That's why I love business designers. They kind of ground us in reality. You know, we'll come up with an idea and they'll be like, okay, should we use a framework to find out whether or not this is actually viable or feasible? So they kind of rain on our parade a lot. End users, of course, they're the ones that really like feed us the most insight into our like final products and deliverables. Clients and stakeholders, we love them. They hold the key to tons of knowledge, you know, especially with these giant companies. They've been around for so long. They do know a lot, and a lot of stuff is measured. So you talk to the right people, you know, you can learn a lot. And then other designers, like we thrive on other designers, that we are inspired by other designers. I would say one major challenge of the pandemic is staying inspired as we go through. You know, we've had to make an active effort to connect with one another and exchange ideas and practices, and you know, how we prototyping this experience that we're living in. So it's a huge challenge. So let's get to some of these questions. So how is service design different for B2B services, where the buyer of the service is not the actual user of the service, for the
And
B2C?
But before you get into that, if you could please, because there may be some people that are unfamiliar with the front of the stage and the back of the stage and what that means exactly. And if you could
Yeah,
maybe share some examples around that.
sure. So front stage, let's talk about that. Front stage, what's a good example? So say I am going to a retail store, right? So I'm buying a pair of jeans. You know, I interact with the employee. I'm buying the jeans directly from that employee who's at the checkout. That employee is a front stage employee. Backstage, those are the people that might be, you know, basically like working in the warehouse. You know, that's a backstage employee. So these are employees or people or things that you're not necessarily directly interacting with, things that you can't necessarily see. You know, can you imagine what the backstage looks like at like Disney World? It's probably insane. Like there's probably so much you don't see. Okay, let's see what else we got in here. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
And then could you jump to the how is service design different for B2B services, where the buyer of the service is not the actual user of the service, compared to B2C, where the person who buys is generally the person using the service?
So B2B is interesting. There's a lot of like similarity with B2B and B2C. You know, I worked with a insurance agency fairly recently, about I would say about a year ago now, and they were trying to create a better tool to sell business insurance to small business owners for auto insurance. I know, like I fell asleep halfway through that sentence. Insurance is not the most exciting thing. But it was really interesting because I actually felt like working B2B, interviewing a lot of these small business owners was actually incredible because they're so passionate about their business. And you know, there's always something to learn, even on like what one might consider a boring insurance project. There's like so much incredible insight to uncover. And it's actually like very exciting to talk to a lot of these people, even if they're not particularly you know, end users, you know, because we're creating this like tool to help them better sell insurance. and ultimately created like a customer facing tool that they weren't using, it was still incredible to talk to these people.
So Dan, we have kind of a pile up of questions.
I'm seeing that.
Yeah, how about I'll pose the questions and then you can decide if you think you're gonna cover it and what's coming next, or if now is the right time. Sam
Okay.
asked, does this mean a service designer can't be the solo designer on the team or business? In reference thinking about startups.
Oh, I mean, you can technically like you can have a service designer that does it all. Like, I mean, a lot of the service designers I work with have like incredible interaction design skills. Technically, my title is service interaction designer. So I technically could be a one-man shop, except I suck at interaction design. So like, I actually think a service designer, if you're working at a startup, a service designer has incredible capability because they can do so much and they know so much and they can connect so many of those dots. So I think a solo service designer is still very capable of doing things, so long as you have a community of other designers to work with.
Then our next question is from Mark, and the gist of the question is two parts. One, if you're working with a client, who are you going to want to talk to about service design? And have you found it difficult to sell that idea? So from an agency perspective, is it difficult to sell the idea of offering service design when most clients expect a campaign or an event?
So the campaign and event comment, that says marketing to me, and we work with tons of different parts of organizations. So also, we typically don't sell service design. We are service designers, but we sell outcomes, right? Like a customer might say, like, we want to create the best, pizza delivery experience there can be. Service designers do that, so it's not necessarily about who's doing it. It's about the outcome we drive. And honestly, as any designer, that should be where your focus should be, is like outcomes, because people don't buy designers, they buy outcomes.
And it can really be discovery or evaluative research too, right? Like let's level set and see what are all the parts and pieces and map that out. Or it could be mapping a solution, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of places that we stop and hand things off as well. Sometimes we'll just do some sort of journey and then they'll take that and run with it and build those concepts themselves. Sometimes we'll take concepts way further than that. So there's lots of capabilities within our capability, basically.
Yeah, I know for me as a UX researcher, I've participated in some service design and it's popped up for us in software development life cycles. So that's where I've seen the application, but I can't say I've ever seen, marketing or HR leverage it as a tool. Not that they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not work. I mean, have you seen that?
We have had some specific projects that are about HR or improving, like, an onboarding experience for employees and things like that. So, I mean, there really is no problem. I mean, there are some problems you can't throw a service designer at. Like, I'm not a technology person. Don't ask me to something, a technology stack. I heard that thrown around. I don't know what that means. Don't look at me for that. But, there's a lot of problems you can solve with service design.
Okay, and then I'm going to take a stab at saying this. I think Q is the name. When you first engage a new client culture, do you find that they are not already familiar with service design concepts and push back as a waste of time? How do you counter that and open their minds? Is that something that you deal with, or are they already familiar and coming to you?
It's not necessarily that people are like against service design or against design thinking. Design thinking is it's trendy and fun still, kind of. But there are clients that are somewhat like resistant and don't always see the value, especially if you're an agent, you work for an agency. Some people are threatened by that. I don't know. But there are ways to get people to buy into what you're doing. And my favorite way of doing that, and I learned this the hard way, right? Like, I once did customer research and then had a workshop and tried to tell the company, this was another energy utility in Michigan, that their employee or that their customers like didn't like a thing they were doing. I had to try to like flat out say like, customers don't like you doing this. And they were like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's wrong. You're wrong. And it's actually one of my favorite challenges now is winning over clients. And the way you typically do that, my favorite way to do that is literal voice of the customer. There's tons of great digital ethnography tools or, research tools that you can use. But if you can literally like get a recording of a customer saying something or enough recordings of customers saying something like to prove your point, that's my absolute favorite way to just get someone to buy in on something. That and get them jazzed about stuff, get them jazzed about the potential of the work you're doing. That's another way. So there are curmudgeon, people that, can ruin a workshop. But there's ways to navigate around that. You can also like facilitate your way through things. If someone is kind of like a negative Nancy, put them at a table with a bunch of people that are, super stoked and excited and kind of let them get drowned out. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I think we covered them. I think we got through the big list.
Cool. Okay. Let's move on. I'm going to go only through one of these really quick because it's my favorite. Examples of service design from my employment. And I think my favorite project, which like, you'd be like, service, what does that have to do with services? And I've kind of been teasing this a little bit, but the drive-through of the future. So this is basically about like, how do you create like drive-through that is, fit for the 21st century or whatever century we're in now. I don't know, what year is it? So this is a super fun project, and it was kind of like, had a mix of physical, had a mix of digital. It was just like an absolute playground, and we had so much trust from our client. They were so trustworthy, and they were like, we just want a prototype. You define what that prototype is. This was 16 weeks. Immediately, we kind of understood our problem, and I apologize for the massive blocks of text on here. This is actually ripped directly from my portfolio. So it actually needs to serve multiple audiences. So I'm gonna give you the highlights here. So we knew that the drive-through needed to hit that sweet spot, that intersection of throughput, which is customers per hour, and customer experience. The brand really cared about how many customers went through per hour, and the speed of the drive-through. Customers didn't really care about that as much, and as long as it was like under 5 minutes, they were fine. So we also know, as I said earlier, the customers' needs and expectations are shifting on account of really excellent experiences out there. So we want to make sure we're accounting for those as well. So this is a snapshot of the research we did, which was a shit ton. We interviewed stakeholders, we interviewed customers, we did intercepts in the drive-through and didn't get run over somehow. We surveyed a bunch. We were all over the place with this research because it was like just like a really fun project, and it was again like a sandbox. And we also ate a lot of fast food. If you're ever working for a fast food client, for the love of God, limit how much fast food you eat, because sometimes they drink the Kool-Aid and it's all they eat. I don't recommend it. We facilitated a workshop. We did our research. We brought in a lot of people, and a lot of the people at this company, they had been working there for years and years. So they had all these ideas, good and bad, that had been cooking up in their heads, no pun intended, for honestly, like for some of them, like 30 years. So we brought them to a workshop. We let them get all their bad ideas out, and then eventually, when they got all the bad ideas out, the good ideas started to come. And we actually weaved all those good ideas together into a few different concepts for what the drive-through of the future could be. We actually had them craft these at a foam core during the workshop and throw Post-its on there for what different features could be. And we forced them to make things all feel seamless, so it actually felt like a cohesive experience. It was super cool. One of my favorite workshops. And here's our design. This is what we came out with. We actually increased the amount of cars per hour in the design from 68 cars per hour to 180 cars per hour. Obviously, this is still being built because I feel like you would probably know what I was talking about if you saw this, but we did that in a few ways. We increased the amount of lanes, which meant we needed to, so each lane has like an order station, right? So employees actually, take the order, but the employees that are actually in the restaurant taking the order are also like washing dishes, learning karate, doing all this weird stuff that is not really related to the order, and it kind of messes up with the customer experience. So we integrated AI voice ordering, and we actually made a couple of prototypes for that as well. And we have that as our order point. So now all of a sudden, employees are no longer overburdened with taking orders. Orders can happen faster and more consistently, and you have more order points. So the drive-thru is made of 3 bottlenecks, right? So we have like, say I'm ordering just soda, and the soccer team in front of me is ordering like 300 cheeseburgers. I have to wait for them to order, I have to wait for them to pay, and I have to wait for them to get that order fulfilled. With our design here, they would be making their order. I would go into the next lane and go around them, not wait for them. I would even pay at that kiosk, and then I would pick up from a multi-window pickup area, so there wouldn't be a bottleneck there either. So we basically blew up all the bottlenecks. It was super cool. And then we validated it. And this is one of my favorite research things I've done is we basically took over their headquarters parking lot. And we had laid out the drive-through design that we have with that lane design. And we had all of our stakeholders drive through it. And what that did was it proved to us what worked and what didn't. But it also kind of got everyone super stoked about what was going to happen. We also had a designer on our team that was incredibly talented, and he actually made a drive-through simulator that actually he put in the algorithms and was able to get all the cars to go around. But I didn't do that, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it was super cool. Yeah. And then, we delivered more than that. We delivered a business case. We had a business designer that was okay, here's the value of this thing. Here's the value if you just take certain components of this thing. And we also gave them a roadmap. Here's how to take this into the future. Do this in the next 12 months, do this in the next 6 months, this in the next 3 months. Another type of map, who'd have thought? And here's just some things that I take full credit for that we want to get into. But in the interest of time, let's actually move on. I mentioned this project before. This is the commercial auto product that we designed. Sometimes we do make screens. We do a little bit of everything. And this is my grad school thesis. I'm going to skip that as well. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about that. I think we have time. So this was my transition into service design. So again, as studying industrial design, I wanted to create a physical product, but I also wanted to create something that had a digital experience to it too. I was trying to find the intersection of physical and digital when it came to fitness, because we know that fitness experiences or exercise-based experiences are highly social. We know that social media is its own brand of social. So I really want to know how those two things intersected. So I wound up doing some very strange research. I wanted to know what it was like to live in a virtual space. And to be virtual is to not really have a body or anything like that. So I decided to I started walking around in a cardboard box and trying to interact with people to see what it was like to interact without a body. Because we're talking about fitness, which is inherently physical. So what if you take the physical out of that? Anyway, this didn't yield anything that exciting, but it actually led me to a different experiment which did yield stuff that was exciting, where I learned a lot about, how when you're virtual, you actually want some sort of avatar, some sort of if you're interacting with someone and say you're FaceTiming with someone or you're on the phone with somebody and you drop the phone, it's oh, sorry, I dropped you. In a sense, they embody that object. So when you're virtual, there needs to be some sort of, or it's helpful to have some sort of icon or some sort of avatar for that person. Here's another experiment that on the left, which is where I made my poor man's telepresence robot, literally an iPad taped to an RC car. Also went to a surprise party virtually, which is now not so weird. And of course, I did a bunch of other stuff here as well. And this is when I taught my class, which informed my design as well. But what I basically learned, as I said before, when you're interacting with someone virtually, it's really helpful to have some sort of something for them to embody. When you have no body, or when you're virtual, you actually have this you're a little more bold. You're not as afraid of things. When you're in a car and you're you feel a little more road ragey, you have that confidence, this sunglass effect. You kind of feel cooler. And there's this really weird balance between barriers and benefits when it comes to fitness. So fitness, while it's motivated by social activities, can also actually be totally blocked by totally blocked by like a social aspect. You know, seeing someone, having someone watch you run for some people is actually incredibly horrifying and terrifying. But actually, if you get past that barrier, that social aspect can be really motivating. So it's kind of a really weird dynamic. So of course I mapped out some opportunities, which is, you know, service design happening before your eyes. And I decided that I realized that, you know, what if you were separate, but also kind of together? So I started doing some experiments about running, but without actually being with each other. So what if we remove that physical aspect of actually, you know, being visible to someone, but still had some sort of community, you know, aspect to it, or some sort of aspect of accountability. And it actually started to yield some interesting results. So then I went into my industrial design mode, and I won't bore you with that. But I wound up creating this tool that basically projected someone else's avatar in front of you, which at this point in my prototyping career was literally just a laser pointer on the ground. But it would basically be, you know, someone else's running data would be approximated based on how you're running. So it would know how fast you're going, how fast someone you're running with is going, and it would project where they are to you. So you can actually have, you know, somewhat of a rabbit as you're running, but without feeling that pressure of someone watching you. So you can kind of see how this starts to like move beyond physical product, move beyond digital product, and into something that's a little more broad. Anyhow, that got me picked up by Fjord. So here's some more outcomes that I've delivered as a service designer that I think are worth noting. So for a healthcare company, I was able to uncover and map a customer experience that actually covered tons of different health occasions, and created this North Star vision that healthcare company could kind of strive toward. And they've been using that North Star and the principles we designed to kind of focus their innovation. I mentioned this before, but I helped a energy utility company find new pathways for customers to pay their bills, customers that need support and are in arrearage, you know, helping them find ways to get help. I helped a fleet of nuclear power plants. I helped them organize their innovation. They had all these disparate ideas because they're all engineers. They all think they're designers when they're engineers. They're not. But you know, they had all these ideas, and they had this terrible problem of you know, employee retention. And we helped them build like a communication strategy and a hub for all these ideas. I've also worked with a massive jewelry retailer to create an experience that engenders confidence in buying engagement rings online. That's a very recent thing because COVID has forced a lot of people to buy engagement rings, not in person. Created a rapid response for COVID-19 travel to make travel comfortable again. Made a future state customer journey for what could exist to kind of engender that confidence. Did some research there as well. And I already talked to the drive-thru. So, how to break into service design. There's not that much left, guys. So if you're getting sleepy, don't worry. How to break into service design. So I covered some of this in the portfolio talk we had a little while ago. But you want to, you know, again, take a holistic lens. Whatever you're working on, whatever you have worked on, try to find a way to take a step back and look at things from a broader view. Showcase your process and outcomes. You know, I know with a lot of digital products and digital design, you know, you want to show that you can do wireframes or comps or whatever. You really, with service design, you want to show how you're approaching problems and how you're solving problems. That's the most important detail. And then again, storytelling, I can't get off that storytelling horse. You want to tell a good story. Simple as that. And I know I'm slightly guilty of this presentation, but be mindful of how much text you have on the page, especially if you're presenting directly to an audience. You don't want to just have this like, you don't want to be competing with what is on the screen. You want to be complementing what's on the screen. And don't read from your slide like a teleprompter, like I've been doing occasionally. 5, how to tell your mom you're interested in service design. Don't. You could just send her this video. This is basically a 3-minute video that tells you everything I just told you in a much more concise way and much more pleasant. I can share the link in the chat after this call. And then that's it. So we have about 10 minutes or so left for any more open questions. So what do you got?
I would say y'all just politely feel free to speak up and make your best attempt not to talk over each other, which is virtually impossible.
Well, Dan, thank you so much. And this is great. I have one quick question for you. Insights are so important in being able to interview. Do you have any like tips or strategies for how to practice, getting to an insight?
Getting to an insight. Okay, well, I would look, I mean, it really is subjective to what you're working on, but you want to make sure that you're seeing what you're finding across multiple sources, right? Like you want to look for things that are, again, they're interesting and relevant, but they might not immediately make sense to you, and you might want to investigate it further. It might be a peculiar behavior or activity. I would just be really thorough with your research, map everything out, write everything down, get it on post-its, get it on a whiteboard, affinitize what you're finding, look for trends in there, and hopefully your insights will come to you. And one thing that I do want to add about research is like, sometimes there isn't like a groundbreaking insight. And I feel like there's always so much pressure on designers to come up with this like, this change the game insight, and it may not always be there. So, be comfortable with what you find. And just be really thorough. That's my best advice for that.
Just a quick note, I've yet to succeed at this, so I'm really hoping today is the day, but at 7:25, I'm gonna launch a poll to hopefully catch everyone before they go. So if you could just please take our quick poll and rate your experience so we can help continue to make STLX events awesome with amazing guests like Dan Gioia, not of St. Louis, Gioia. Come and visit. We would super appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, this is Lois. I have a question for you.
Hey, Lois.
Hi. You mentioned that it sounds like you've been doing some service design during this time, during the pandemic, and that you're using more remote tools. I noticed on your stickies, digital stickies. You also mentioned Excel. I was wondering, could you maybe talk a little bit more about some of, and it doesn't have to be tools, but I'm so used to being in person with my clients for workshops and things like that. I'm curious about how it's working for you remotely and maybe any tips you have.
There are challenges for sure. I mean, there is one nice thing about workshops that are in person is you're getting the client out of their comfort zone. You're literally bringing them into a different space. And with that, you're bringing them into a new headspace. And now it's really hard because we're all just like in our friggin' desk chairs in our homes. But I do think that like you can facilitate a good workshop with a digital whiteboard for sure. And there are workarounds within them to like, use them as presentation tools as well. I've been a really big fan of digital whiteboards. I know they're limited, but I also find it really helpful to like get up, walk around, and like use my own walls for whiteboards. You can only do so much staring at a screen. It has been challenging, but I think like I constantly am searching for new ways to stay inspired and keep the client really excited. I don't know if that's a solid answer, but maybe it's just empathy. Maybe it's just, it's just hard.
Thanks.
Sure.
Hi, Dan. I have a question for you. This is Manshit. So I am a UX designer, but like any UX design generalist, I usually don the hat of a UX researcher, service designer, design strategist, and everything else that comes and falls under the umbrella of UX design. So when I am, let's say, talking to an organization or a company and trying to convince them to hire me as a service designer, why would they not hire a UX generalist who can do a bit of everything and pick a service designer over me? And my second part is, how do you differentiate yourself from a UX designer as a service designer?
So if I understand this correctly, you're saying like, why wouldn't they just hire someone like you instead of a service designer?
Yes.
Okay. Bold. Yeah. So I mean, it really depends, what you're showing. And it's not just about like I have these skills. It's about like how you use these skills and how you weave them together. Obviously, like a lot of the service designers I work with do have a UX background, but they've just they've grown their service design muscles some more. So again, it comes back to portfolio. It's really how you frame yourself and how you frame the work you've done and how you frame the direction you want to move moving forward. I typically, and me and my colleagues typically don't get super hands-on in wireframes and screens and creating digital products and doing detailed design and things like that. But I think I would just ask myself, like, what do you want to be doing as a designer? Do you want to be a design researcher? Do you want to be, doing more detailed design, or do you want to be more upstream and doing things that are more generalized? So, I mean, there's no reason someone shouldn't hire you as a service designer. It sounds like you've got the skills, but I would just frame yourself the right way.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, just to clarify, I do identify myself as a service designer, but always tagged as a UX designer. That's why I wanted to ask that question. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Dan, we have a question from the chat. Amanda would like to know, what's one thing you wish service designers would stop doing? And what's one thing you wish they'd start doing?
Ooh, that's a good question.
She's always got great questions.
Oh yeah, okay. One thing I would ask service designers to stop doing is relying on the same tools and expecting the same results, which is hard nowadays. Like I personally have been relying really hard on digital ethnography tools because it's really hard to get customers in front of you nowadays. But like, I think it's really important for service designers to stay vigilant and like explore new avenues and new ways to learn. One of the tools I use a lot called D-Scout. It's like a way of like digitally surveying people and getting them to submit videos of themselves. It's a great tool, but it kind of skews toward the digitally savvy. And so we're not really, capturing all of our customers, and those who aren't digitally savvy, their needs go to the wayside. So, I would say, be vigilant. I wish they would stop, using the same old tools and expecting different results. And something I wish they would start doing, being more humble. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Let me come back to that one. Let me think about that one a little bit.
Okay, oh gosh, okay, it's 7:25. So I'm gonna launch the poll real quick. And then I think we have time for one more question. And then I have just a couple quick announcements before we're gonna wrap up. Does that sound okay?
Cool.
Okay, let's see if I pass Zoom poll today. Everybody cross your fingers. This seems like it should be so easy. Okay, launch poll. It says I did it. So everyone should get some sort of prompt. Ooh, I see people voting.
Well, I'm gonna vote 5.
I mean, why wouldn't you? It's looking pretty good here, Dan.
All right.
Yeah, I'd say excellent job. Very, very nice work tonight.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for the great questions. I really appreciate it. And Holly, of course, thanks for inviting me on to do this. It's not every day I get to talk about this. And frankly, sometimes it's hard to sum up service design briefly. Like, honestly, like my mom has no idea what I do. And she thinks I make apps, which is fine. But
join the club. My mom doesn't either.
Like, you guys can request me on LinkedIn, send me a note if you have any questions, whatever works.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan. It was really generous of you to come back so soon. You were just here in October, and we're really lucky to have you again. And I'm going to share my screen, which is going to kick you off. Not personal, I promise. So as I mentioned, keep an eye out. Hopefully everybody can see my screen, or it should be, the magic is happening. We will be having trivia in February. I know it's not the same as St. Louis style trivia. For you folks who are out of town, feel free to hit me up and I'll tell you all about how we do it weird here. But like awesome weird. So start thinking about your snacks. And if you're interested in becoming a member of STLX, we have a few different options. You can join as with a annual business membership, and you can see there's some delicious benefits there, or you can join as a pro member or a student member, and you get some swag along with that, and it helps support things like this event with the amazing Dan Gioia. And let's see if I can get this. If you would like to chat, Al, who is not here today, which never happens, so I'm flying solo. I feel like, so discombobulated. If you want to reach out to Al, here's her contact info. I'm Holly Schroeder. You can reach me this way. I would definitely say that email is the fastest way to get in touch with me. I'm not as diligent about checking the other two. And then STLX we have our own website, STLXmeetup.com. We have an awesome Slack channel that's very active, and I would definitely encourage you to join. We'd love to have you, whether you're in or out of town. We've got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We have all the things. You can find STLX everywhere. And I think that's it. So thanks so much for everyone coming tonight. And I hope you have a fantastic evening. And again, Dan, rockstar, have a great night. Stay safe, stay warm. Everyone be well. Good night.
Woot. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Dan.
Hi, Lois.
Hi, Holly. See you guys later.
Good
Bye.
talk, Dan. Thanks.
Thanks.
Night, y'all.